Okay, we're continuing with the quote book, going in alphabetical order. We're on John Locke. John Locke was the famous political philosopher, writer from England. He lived from 1632 to 1704. Thomas Jefferson absolutely loved him, thought he was one of the most greatest men who ever lived. He wrote a couple different books. He wrote a book on religious tolerance, and that kind of became famous for trying to get English to calm down. You got to remember this was sort of the era of the Puritans and the psychomaniac Cromwell the butcher, okay, just going around bumping off anybody who didn't agree with his religious beliefs, including a lot of Irish people. That's how the English treated the Irish. And so Locke was good, saying, people are going to have differences of religious opinion. Give them a break. And I was just amazed at how many people listened to John Locke. He was very influential during his life. He also wrote another book on liberty, about freedom. He wrote about, thoughts concerning education, how we should educate our children. And he wrote a lot about political treatises, who should rule, who should have the power. But I don't really think you can decide who has the power. The people who know how to take it, they're the ones who've got the power, okay? I can also tell you, John Locke, when I was at Stanford, there was a graffiti arrow in the bathroom next to the toilet lock called John Locke. And a lot of people write about John Locke, talk about John Locke. And, for example, Wilmore Kendall, the American genius political philosopher guy, he's just in love with John Locke, and he agrees with him, disagrees with him. He'll say he spends, countless amount of time going back and forth about his book. And I'm just going to tell you, I kind of think political science is a little bit of a joke. And what I mean by that is, like, I remember when guys were saying they're going to major in college in political science, poli-sci. And I thought, what a joke, what a waste of a degree. You're going to spend 4 years bullshitting around. You could at least get a degree in history and learn something. All you're going to do is, be a professional, spin artist, BS artist. Is that how you want to spend your life? And I can also tell you, I love Wilmore Kendall. I think he's a genius, and I like him, and he's funny, and he's nice, and he really meant well, and he wanted the best for America. That's all well and good. But here's what it comes down to. The bottom line is the left hates America. They want to turn America into a third world country. And there's no point debating the fine nuance of John Locke's book when the fact is the left just wants to destroy the place, open up the you-know-what down south, flood the place with third world savages that hate Americans, and destroy the place. Okay? That's it. Okay? That's not a topic for debate. You simply have to say, well, we need to preserve the you-know-what, the thing down south that protects us. Okay? The border, okay? You don't need a debate about the nuance of John Locke, comparing John Locke to Hobbes' Leviathan, okay? You don't need all that sophistical political stuff. It's not that complicated. If somebody poisons your water with aluminum and fluoride, they don't like you. If they poison your food with glyphosate and atrazine, they don't like you. If there's trails in your sky, they don't like you. You don't need to read John Locke or Thomas Hobbes or the philosophes or any of these guys to know that. I mean, that's 2 + 2 = 4. I don't know why that's so hard. Everybody's been brainwashed in a public school. The Europeans got a little more sense because at least they've lived in Europe and they've seen how, Poland got brutalized by Germany, brutalized by Russia. Ireland's brutalized by England. So they might have at least a little bit of sense, but even a lot of Europeans are pretty stupid. I mean, it's so obvious. It's so obvious. Anyways, continuing with John Locke. He said, certain subjects yield a general power that may be applied in any direction and should be studied by all. Yeah, everybody should learn study skills so you can learn stuff faster. Everybody should learn rhetoric so you can write more effectively and speak more effectively. Okay, everybody should learn memory techniques so you can remember stuff better. It's obvious. Okay. Everybody should learn how to write because you're going to have to write sooner or later, and you might as well be able to communicate effectively. Everybody should study the ancient Greeks because they're the most awesome population you'll ever study in your life. Everybody should study the ancient Romans because they were brutal and nobody's got a dog in the fight, so you can talk openly about them. Everybody should study the Italian Renaissance because it's so magnificent. It's awesome and it'll inspire you for the rest of your life. There are things that everybody should know. Okay, John Locke continues. The great art of learning much is to undertake a little at a time. Yeah, that's pretty obvious. If you study the great writers and the great geniuses, it's pretty common. They carried a little notebook with them. And whenever they had an interesting thought or they read something interesting, had an interesting conversation, they'd make a little note of it. And then they would consolidate it into bigger notes later on. This is what I think is interesting about diabetes, about hypertension, about coronary artery disease, about understanding women, okay? John Locke continues. Reading furnishes the mind only with the materials of knowledge. It is thinking that makes what we read ours. Yep. And others have agreed with him. He's almost contemporary. Actually, he comes a lot before Schopenhauer. And again, this is common the way smart people think. You just try to learn a little bit each day, and it builds up over time. He next says, the Bible is one of the greatest blessings bestowed by God on the children of men. It has God for its author, salvation for its end, and truth without any mixture for its matter. It is all pure. Okay. Anybody that's going to know anything about Western civilization, you got to read the Bible a little bit. You don't have to read the Bible, every word of it cover to cover, but you should know the big stories in it. John Locke, fashion for the most part is nothing but the ostentation of riches. I actually think fashion, how you dress, it's a way to control other people. In a sense, I mean, if you dress like a bum, people treat you like a bum. If you dress nice, you get treated with more respect. I had that experience. I go to the grocery store, wearing a t-shirt when I was younger, and they treat me like I'm a bum. So nowadays, I won't go to the grocery store unless I'm dressed nice, because otherwise they treat you like crap, Maybe if you're a beautiful woman or if you're a real tall, good-looking man, you get treated nice no matter what. But I can tell you, if you're just a regular guy like me, you dress like a bum, you get treated like a bum. You dress nice, not that I get treated well, but at least I don't get treated bad. Okay, he continues. People, and also like women will judge you by how you dress and how you look. I'm telling you, if you ever go on a date, dress your best the first date. Because she's like going to do this whole, shit test analysis of you. And so you might as well look your best if you actually are considering liking her. And if you're not considering liking her and going out with her, why are you dating her, wasting your time? Okay, people are like chameleons. They take their hue and the color of their moral character from those who are around them. That's kind of funny, too. Pearl Daly, that really funny, clever female psychologist, dating coach lady, she was talking about how women will change so much when they really want a man. They'll convert religions. They'll convert political philosophies. If they really want a guy, they'll do what they have to do to get him. There was one funny video I just saw where a lady was looking for a husband, so she dresses all foxy, and then she just keeps walking around in, the Home Depot store with her grocery cart. Okay, next, John Locke. Okay, he says, the natural liberty of man is to be free from any superior power on earth, and not to be under the authority of man, but only to have the law of nature for his rule, all mankind. Being all equal and independent, no one ought to harm another in his life, health, liberty, or possessions. So you can see where the Declaration of Independence was strongly influenced by this. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. You can almost see the words of John Locke being transferred into the Declaration of Independence. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, pursuit of possessions. Okay, but what I would say is you can't have this stuff if you don't have Christianity. Christianity says man is created in the image of God, therefore part divine, therefore entitled to natural rights, just because he's human and he's of value. All right? So there's a moral foundation, and there's no way around that, From Genesis, from the painting of Michelangelo, the creation of Adam on the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Okay, that's the foundation of it all. Okay, and without that, you really can't claim anything because you can rationalize anything. If you don't have God and the Bible moral foundation to start it all off with, man is created in the image of God, anything goes. Fyodor Dostoevsky, if there is no God, then everything is permitted. That's just how it is. That's why you have to have God and you have to have Christian ethics. Otherwise, you've got slavery. There's no two ways about it. I don't know why that's so hard for people, They let their public, like a typical public school brainwashing person will say, well, I don't think it was necessarily intentional that they poisoned our water. I don't think it's necessarily intentional that they poisoned our food. I don't think it's necessarily intentional that they polluted the air. Yeah, right. Go knit some socks, you moron. If you don't understand that, the billionaire perverts can do whatever they want. If they want to pollute your water, they will pollute your water. If they like you and they don't want to pollute your water, they will not pollute your water. God loved us and he did not pollute our water. Okay, the billionaire perverts don't like us and they pollute our water. Okay, that's not rocket science. That's 2 plus 2. If you can't handle 2 plus 2, how can you handle any other math? Okay, John Locke. Okay, he says, The end of law should not be to abolish or restrain freedom, but to preserve it and to enlarge freedom. The only fence, the only way we can deal with the world is by having a thorough knowledge of it. I have no reason to suppose that he who would take away my liberty would not, when he had me in his power, take away everything else. You will own nothing and like it, is what we've been told. John Locke, the reason men enter into society is for the preservation of their property. Isn't that nice? The opposite of Karl Marx. Good. Okay, John Locke continues. He says, there cannot be a greater rudeness than to interrupt another in his current of discourse. The love of truth for truth's sake is the principal part of human perfection in this world. Not many people really care about truth. They'll tell you, oh yeah, I care about the truth. Are you willing to read and study and figure it out? Oh no, of course, I can't do that. Are you willing to go against popular opinion? Oh no, I can't do that. Well, then you don't really love the truth, okay? John Locke continues, new opinions are always suspected and usually opposed without any other reason but because they are not common. It's more than because they're not common. Most people don't want to bother forming a new opinion. The people with power and money typically are benefiting from the situation, the system, the way it is, and they don't want it to change. It could be an insult to their finance. It could be an insult to their prestige. It could be something that they don't want to spend time on, so why should they accept it? Okay, and they don't. Okay, look, John Locke. From whence comes our mind to be furnished, but from experience? The mind is a tabula rasa. Let us then suppose the mind to be, as we say, white paper, void of all characters, without any ideas. How comes it to be furnished? Whence comes it by that vast store, which the busy and boundless fancy of man has painted on it with an almost endless variety? Whence has it all the materials of reason? To this I answer in one word, from experience. Okay, so this is the tabula rasa, that the brain is a blank slate, but that's not true. I think Carl Jung was more accurate when he said we have these like behavioral mechanisms that are activated at certain times, okay? When I hit puberty, I did not need to read a book to have for someone to tell me that I liked women, okay? I just like women. I can't help it. If I didn't like women, I'd be a much wealthier man. I once made a lecture about the homo advantage. You don't have to have a wife. You don't have to pay for divorce. You don't have to pay for kids. We love women. We're programmed to love women. We can't help it. Even though they lie to us, they're bitchy, they're moody, they manipulate us, we still love them, okay? I love my girlfriend when she comes over. I love when she cooks for me, okay? And even if I'm not going to make the two-back beast with her, I still would want her here cooking for me and doing my laundry and stuff. I don't want some guy coming over to my place cooking for me and doing my laundry. No, I want her, okay? And even if it was another girl and I wasn't banging her, I like a woman around. I just like a woman around. I'm happy when a woman's in the room. I just like women. And nobody taught me that. And it goes against my benefit, okay? I'd be better off if I didn't. Financially, I'd be much better off, all right? Women have cost me a lot of money and anguish in my life, but I still love them. I can't help it. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that's not tabula rasa. That's an instinct. That's in our blood, okay? And also, I like a painting just because it's beautiful and I just feel that it's good. That's not something necessarily taught. I can feel it in my heart and I know it. Some things are instinctual. We have an inner moral sense that's more than just experience. John Locke, perception is the first step towards knowledge. Okay, because you have to be careful because you sometimes get into all this BS like Immanuel Kant, trying to say you can't trust your perception, or you get into David Hume's nonsense arguments, and that stuff will, like Ayn Rand had said, anybody who reads Immanuel Kant and takes him seriously ends up smoking dope. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. Some of these philosophers, including, the great Schopenhauer, they go crazy after they read Kant. You should reject Kant. You should actually hate Immanuel Kant. Ayn Rand described him as the most evil philosopher who ever lived, as the first hippie. And she was right. He was trying to destroy people's reason by playing all his little word games. And you have to get beyond that. The proper way to go, and there's a good quote here by John Locke, the place to start with the study of how men behave is Aristotle. Aristotle tells you the truth and helps you to deal with reality as it is. Okay, John Locke, perception is the first step towards knowledge. Okay. John Locke, a greater part of mankind are unavoidably given over to invincible ignorance. What I've seen is nobody wants to read. And I say that not from talking to, cognitively impaired patients. I say that from talking to doctors. I talk to doctors all the time. And what most of them say is they don't read because they don't have any time. And I always say that's BS. All you got to do is listen to an audiobook in the car and have a book in your bathroom. Make a magic bathroom with a little table in there. I read 2 books in a minimum every week just by doing that. It's pretty easy to do. All right, the smartest doctors I know, they read a little bit, okay? And that's good. You got to keep putting new information in your brain or you get ignorant. David Lodge lived from 1935 to, I think he's still alive. He said, literature is mostly about having sex and romance and not about having children, but life is the other way around. Life's mostly about, paying the bills for the family while they're divorcing you, their kids are taken away from you. That's life for the modern American man. Okay, David Lodge. The novel is inherently a middle-class art form. I don't know about that. In a novel, names are never neutral. Well, that's true. They always have the name for effect. Literature must aim, this is Italo Calvino, literature must aim at the maximum concentration of poetry and thought. Yeah, that's one way to view it. I look at writing as infotainment, to provide information and to entertain. Okay, we'll just do one more quote here from this guy, Cesare Lombroso. He lived 1836 to 1909. He said, genius is being essentially original and a lover of originality, and this is the natural enemy of traditions. Well, I don't think it's a natural enemy of tradition. Geniuses don't necessarily have anything against the traditions. They just think they can improve upon one area of thought. Copernicus wasn't against the church. He just felt that the sun was in the center instead of the earth, okay? And it's the same way, Newton had his ideas. He would have been declared a heretic if his friends didn't protect him about the Bible. He spent, half his time studying the Bible. So geniuses just think more deeply than most people and study something for a more prolonged amount of time because they want to understand it better, get closer to the truth. It's not because they don't like the traditions. So anyways, I hope you found that helpful.